Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a compulsive overeater. Um, and as was just shared, sorry, um, step 8 is making that list of all the uh, people, places, things, institutions, whatever, that we have harmed, and becoming willing to make amends to them all. Step 9 is making the amends. Steps 1 through 5 is cleaning up our life. And step 6 and 7 is really that becoming willing to have our defects removed, which means we need to take action, which we do in steps 8 and 9. 8 is the willingness to take the action of 9 because we want to clean up our past. And on page, the directions for step 8 they're intermingled with step 9. So I'm reading from the big book. I will be changing the language, assuming you're looking at the big book as well. At page 76, it says, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. I'm right in the middle of the page. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. Now, when I took my inventory, when I took step 5 and went through, my sponsor said, just put a big red A next to that one. Put a big red A next to that one. And I'm like, oh, what's that mean? She said, well, we'll look at it in step 8 and 9, but then you'll have your list ready when you're at step 8, because it's everybody that potentially, who I'd already mentioned, needed an amends. And we didn't discuss it at the time in step 5. She just said put it there because maybe. And there were more that I added. They didn't all come up in my resentments and fears, but they that list had lots to get me started. And it says it. And she said, why would you be doing this now? Because it says we did it when we took our inventory, and we just follow the directions that are in the book. We had this list. We made it when we took inventory. Then we subjected ourselves to drastic self-appraisal. Self-appraisals in OA are not friendly. They're not easy. They're not painless. They're drastic. And now this self-appraisal, have I harmed somebody? And so, I've had people I've sponsored. I had lots. I was a compulsive thief, compulsive cheat. And my house was full of stolen goods. I cheated my way through my master's degree. I knew I had amends to make. Some people go, well, I know. And I'm like, did you ever mope around? Because, when we mope around, the people in the room are affected in a negative way. And it's like, oh, but I never said anything. Yeah, you sat in the corner and they're all like, oh God, don't go talk to Anna over there in the corner because she'll bite your head off, or she'll just pull you into her moping and realizing, oh, I've harmed people. So it's drastic. We really look hard. And then, okay, we go out and start making these amends. But the last line in that paragraph is really important. There's a prayer, step 8 prayer, and some people go, oh, there's only certain prayers. Well, here's one. If we haven't the will to do this, to go out and make the amends, we ask, well, we don't ask our sponsor or our mother, we ask God, our higher power, until it comes. What comes? The willingness, step 8, the willingness to make these amends. So if I'm not willing, I ask. And remember, it was agreed at the beginning, we would go to any lengths. We will go to the federal government and say we took benefits and ask to repay them. And I had to do 10% interest on everything I'd stolen. And I had literally, hundreds, thousands of pounds worth of stolen goods and stolen benefits that my sponsor said, add 10%, it would have been somebody else's money in the bank. And they might have been good investors, but to go to any lengths for victory over the food, over the compulsive overeating. probably there are still some misgivings. Well, if there are misgivings, I then pray that prayer, because step 8 is to be willing to make these amends. I had a list that we were willing to make amends. So when I started my 9th step, my sponsor had me do a couple very simple ones. You know, I'd stolen something from a shop, and I had to go to that shop, and it was very clear. I stole this item. It costs $3.99. I've added 40 pence. It was in the United States. And so now I owe you $4.40. And here it is. And so it was easy. There wasn't maybe.
2 minutes left.
Thank you.
2 minutes left, Anna.
Thank you. And then I wasn't willing when I started my 9th step to make all of them. I mean, I was willing in a way because I knew I wanted to stay abstinent, but I wasn't willing to do it that day. Let's put it that way. And so the 8th step prayer continues to be sure that I am willing to do whatever it takes. And as I said, I had taken federal benefits, national benefits. I had cheated a lot. I had a house that had lots and lots of stolen goods in it that needed to be repaired, replaced, or returned, or paid for. And I became willing. And that 8th step did finish before my 9th step finished. Because I began learning that every amends I made me feel absolutely wonderful and clean. And so I became more and more willing to do the big ones and the harder ones, the ones that would impact me or that could send me to jail or ruin relationships. I just realized I'm ready to stay abstinent. And I became willing to make those amends. The list, I went through my house. I had lots of stolen goods in drawers that had not come up in any inventory. And so I just kept writing them down on the list, return those shoes to the bowling alley in Chicago, whatever it was, and became willing to do that. So yeah, just the first 7 steps have to be really solid. If I hadn't made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of a higher power, I might have been afraid. But I never was afraid of the 9th step. I just, pride got in the way a little bit. But, you know, the gratitude for being abstinent was greater than the need to be afraid or take care of my pride, like not do something because, oh, I'd be afraid to do that. Well, my sponsor said, turn that over because you're either going to do it to stay well.
Bye, Anna.
Thanks. Over to Sarah.
Good morning, my name is Sarah. I'm a compulsive overeater, and I'm going to share also on step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And I'm reminded very much in this step that there are, and having read it in the OA 12 and 12, that it's in 2 parts. You know, the first part is the list, and the second part is becoming willing to make those amends. But it's not making those amends. That comes in year 9, in step 9. But they are very much kind of, they do go as a sort of a, well, every step links into the one, you know, following it. And I'm reminded of the phrase that my sponsor used to say to me, and still has to, and I say it, see that your motives are right. And with step 8, you know, if my motives are right, I'm going to make a list of these persons that I've harmed. And when I say sorry to them, they're going to go, oh, thanks, Sarah, I accept your apology. And actually, you know, I was awful too, and I did X, Y, and Z, but I'm really proud of you now. You can't go into it with that kind of expectation, because an expectation is a premeditated resentment. So I have to go into step 8, or I have to do step 8 in the knowledge that this is about me apologizing for my behavior, my actions, my thoughts. But it's not about, I've got to kind of try and have no expectation of what the person is going to say. You know, if they say, you know what, don't want you in my life anymore, I've got to be all right with that, because that, you know, that's their stuff. But the point is, it's me on that. It's on that clean, very much that cleaning house, that clearing my side of the street, which begins with the steps and is very much formalized in step 10. So it's wonderful how one step links into another. And it's also very true that for me, step 4 informed my step 8, and when I'm with sponsees now, I'll often say to them when they're doing their step 5, they've written their step 4, they're telling me their step 5, and I'll often just say, oh, get another piece of paper, write step 8 at the top and put that name on it. And they'll go, but I don't want to find them, I don't want to talk to them. Well, you're not doing it yet, it's just a piece of paper, stick it in the back of your file or whatever. But step 4 does inform your step 8 to some extent. And it talks in the reading about how we were unable to nurture effective relationships with other people. Very much my story, but step 8 is the beginning of me kind of standing up, being a grown-up, taking responsibility and beginning to nurture those effective relationships. Because when I was in the food, I would just isolate and eat. And I remember thinking, well, what have I got to do apart from, get physically abstinent? But actually, my defective ways of dealing with people had led those people to be hurt, including myself, I would add, my defective way of dealing with myself. So I include myself in that. It's been a great source of pain. And I've got to learn better ways of dealing with people. And that is what I'm taught through step 8, step 9, and the rest of the steps. And I'm guided through it by my sponsor. There was a couple of people when I did my step 8, the wife of the husband of the or whatever, or the friend of the cousin of the. And my sponsor said, Sarah, a couple of these amends are a bit sort of convoluted and actually not necessary. I think that was part of me going, I've got to apologize for who I am, what I am. I have, but not to the whole world, so there's that as well. It's about getting right size with these steps, which is why I run it past a sponsor, so I can have a very realistic, I can be trained, I can be supported and guided into a more realistic way of looking at myself. So in step 8, we're looking at the relationships for the purpose of looking at those patterns. And there's a really nice line in here. It says, we meet guilt head on and we get rid of it. And that was massive. My guilt around my addictions was really, really, I'm remembering the pain of it as I'm saying it. And I had to meet that guilt. I had to talk about it in the previous steps. And then in step 8, you were preparing for step 9, where you're going to meet that guilt. You're going to meet that guilt and you're going to say it.
Left, Sarah.
Thank you, Jackie, to the appropriate person. Get rid of it is quite a sort of quite a sweeping, it's not as easy as that. But the whole, the steps are stepping stones, not millstones. That's what a friend of mine says. And it's very true. They're not designed to remind me of how guilt-ridden and awful I am. They are to remind me that there's a good person inside me and to go forth and find that. And also, there's a very key part in here. It talks about, really, it's about looking at things differently, because it says, think about what kind of harm. And when I'm tempted to go, well, I haven't really harmed many people. Another suggestion of looking at it is, well, look at ways you've been hurt, Sarah. Look at ways that you've been hurt, and then think about how you've done that to other people. So I might, remember that time when someone gossiped about me and how much it hurt. Do you remember how much it hurt you, Sarah? Right. So do you remember when you did X, Y, and Z about X, Y, and Z and how hurt that other person must have felt? So it's great, tipping it on its head. And it's a written step, albeit quite short. It's only a list. In my early days, someone used to say in a meeting, oh, see, when you do step 8, you got this list, these people you're walking down the high street and they leap out. And I remember going, well, I don't want them leaping out. I don't want all these people leaping out I've got to make amends to. And that's not how it happens. I think the person who said it was making the point that kind of great coincidences occur. But you've got to be ready. You've got to be ready for step 8. The step 8 is only a list. And you will work and you will talk through step 8, and then you'll be ready for step 9, which is when you say those amends, which for me was very, very emotional, very, very freeing. It was extremely emotional when I made amends, especially, well, with my
Sarah.
closest people. So thank you ever so much for listening. Thank you.